Hey folks, today we are going to make a family Thanksgiving tradition. This was my grandmother's recipe. My mother bakes it, my sister bakes it. It's absolutely delicious, and it only takes 2 days to make. Okay, it really does take 2 days to make, but all the prep is done the day before, and then you let it sit in the refrigerator overnight and then bake it the day of. So here are the ingredients we're going to need. The bulk of the dressing is, of course, cornbread, and the meat comes from a whole chicken that we're going to boil. And bacon goes on top because, well, bacon just doesn't need a reason. We are going to boil our chicken for several hours, and the original recipe calls for, quote, a fat hen. I could not find a fat hen. I don't know where you find a fat hen. So just get a regular whole chicken. It'll be fine. On a side note, the CDC used to recommend that you wash your turkey, you wash your chicken in the sink. Well, they've reversed that because basically all you're doing is splashing chicken water around and possibly contaminating everything else in your kitchen. Any possibility of salmonella is going to cook off, so just throw it right in the pan, get it boiling, and in the meantime we're going to grease up our cast iron skillet and mix up some cornbread. If you're brave enough to make cornbread from scratch, knock yourself out, but the prepackaged mixed stuff works just fine. Give that a good stir, and remember there's no gluten in this, so you don't have to worry about over stirring it. Just stir until you get all the clumps out. Now this is key. Before you put your dough or the mixture in the pan, you must have put your pan in the oven and let it preheat. Having a very hot cast iron skillet will give you that nice crust that you want on the outside of cornbread. Here I'm just checking on our boiled chicken to make sure it's simmering. And notice how our edge of the cornbread was nice and crispy. That's what we want. I boiled this chicken for about 3 hours or so, and it just completely was falling apart. So scoop that out, and we're going to break apart the chicken and just pick off all the meat from the chicken. We'll use the chicken broth a little bit later, so make sure you don't throw that out. So, of course, I had to taste the cornbread. So if you did it right, nothing will stick, or very little will stick. And because we preheated our pan, we get that nice crust. So just break that apart with your hands, nothing complicated here. Yep, really not this fast, just sped up the video for time's sake. Nothing complicated here, just mix it up. And then after letting the chicken cool for several minutes, we're just going to pick apart the meat, throw it in the bowl. The bones and everything else, throw it back into the stock pot. We're going to continue to boil this to make some nice homemade chicken broth. Side note, this will make far more broth than we'll need for this recipe, so you can absolutely save this. You can bottle it, freeze it, or if you have a pressure cooker and you're in the canning, you can absolutely can this and then run it through the pressure cooker to do the canning part. Yep, just throw the whole carcass back in there and let it simmer. Now I'm just tearing apart the white meat. You might have to get a knife and just chop it up, which is perfectly fine. Yep, here I'm just running my blade through it. Nothing complicated here, just getting it down into smaller pieces. And throw everything in the bowl. Now I'm just going to chop up and dice one onion and throw it in the bowl. Now we're going to add about 1/8 cup of poultry seasoning. That's a lot, that's okay. And we're going to add I don't know, maybe 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons of ground sage. Not rubbed sage, but ground sage. It's a little finer. That's really the magic ingredient here. That's something that you just have to add to taste. Now that our stock has been boiling for a few more hours, I'm going to go ahead and drain that. I'll start by just getting rid of the bigger pieces. And I'm throwing them in my cast iron pan right now, but that will just go in the trash. This is really the wrong way to strain something. I'm pouring the liquid towards me instead of away from me. So when you do this, be very careful. It's a boiling liquid and it will burn you. Just pouring it through a strainer, get rid of all the big pieces, straining it into a pot. Now I'm going to kick up the flavor of this stock just a little bit by adding some bouillon. So be sure not to add too much. Add a little bit, test it. Add more if you need to. Now we're going to add our stock, beef broth, chicken broth, whatever you want to call it, to our mixture. The idea here is to let the cornbread absorb as much of the liquid as it can. So if you get it a little too soupy, that would be better than being a little bit too dry. Now I'm just testing, pulling the spoon through the dressing, and no liquid was running out, and it appeared to be fully saturated, so that's good. Now I'm just using Crisco to grease a pan. We don't use butter here because butter is mostly water and will just boil more liquid, and then it's more liquid we have to boil out. Nothing complicated here, just dump it out. And of course all of this is done the day before. We're adding bacon because bacon doesn't need a reason. Bacon just makes everything better. Now at this point, done for the day, so go ahead and put some aluminum foil on that, saran wrap, whatever, and put that in the refrigerator. It is very important to let this sit overnight to let all the flavors meld together, and then the next day we bake it. So go ahead and preheat your oven. This is the next day, people. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Throw it in there for an hour, and here's what we got. Now we're throwing it back in the oven and baking it until as much of the moisture is baked out that we want, and now we get to plate it. Folks, I ask if you like this video, please click the like button and hit subscribe to our channel, and happy Thanksgiving.